It's Two on the Aisle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight, reviews of Smokey Joe's Café, Straight White Men, Summer Shorts Series A, and This Ain't No Disco. Plus, our interview with press agent extraordinaire, Susan L. Schulman. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two on the Aisle. And hello, Leslie.
Hello, Charlie.
We have so much to do today. We're going to start immediately, and that is Smokey Joe's Café, the songs of Lieber and Stoller.
And it is just a joy to talk about this show. We walked out, both of us, being very happy about this. The thing that's most amazing is that Lieber and Stoller wrote songs for everybody, and I didn't remember that. And you mentioned, well, I'll let you mention if you want to, that they also appear in Beautiful.
Well, they are in Beautiful, which is the Carole King musical.
Right. But because it takes place in the building,
in that era,
right.
it just gives you an idea of how important their music was, both to the time and both to aspiring songwriters at that time.
Well, each of the songs is a little one-act play. So there's no storyline per se, but each song allows one of the members of this extremely talented and unknown cast to shine.
For now, not for much longer.
But they all have credits. They have credits from The Lion King to Spamilton. You know, so they run the gamut of having work. And I want to read all their names before we finish.
Okay.
But I did want to say two things. I wanted to say that Buress, I got this wrong, Burgass. Joshua Burgess, I'm so sorry.
The director
very talented,
and choreographer.
but he's a choreographer making his directorial debut, and I'm so excited because he's done a marvelous job. He knew enough to stay back. He knew enough to let the stories tell themselves. He knew enough to put the right person in each song. The set is by Beowulf Barrett, and it goes. It's a bar. Obviously, it's got all the little neon, beer signs. But it's got a staircase that goes around and it's circular, and they use
and a lot of old radios.
And radios that light up because that's where all this music was played, was on those radios.
Right.
So it's set in the right place.
I just want to read off a couple of the songs that you will hear: Jailhouse Rock, Kansas City, then Along Came Jones, Poison Ivy. Smokey Joe's Café, Yakety Yak, Charlie Brown on Broadway, Love Potion Number 9, Spanish Harlem. I love the cast. I love the little sketches. This is a revival of a show that was on Broadway.
I liked it better this
years
time.
ago. I think I liked it about the same. But
no, I found it to be a standard jukebox musical the first time. I find this to be different, and not that it's not a jukebox musical, but the fact that the stories tell themselves, that they're not forcing anything into it. The only forced thing is that they're on a set marked Smokey Joe's Café, and that's not really forced.
Right, and the thing is about the final 25% of the play, it's really most of them just getting up and singing. They abandoned the story premise.
Well,
and at that point, I still enjoyed the show. I didn't find it as interesting. Okay, we're on a tight schedule today, so why don't you
quickly read the names
please do.
Dwayne Cooper, Emma Degerstedt. She's the gal whose dress wiggles and friggles.
Yeah, she's the one who shimmies.
Yeah, she shimmies and the dress shimmies with her.
You know,
John Edwards, Dion Fitton, Nicole Vanessa Ortiz, Kyle Taylor Parker, Jelani Remy, Max Zangerman, and Alicia Umpress. I believe that's everybody.
And they each get a chance to shine, and they run with it.
And they either run with it, or they go up and down the stairs with it, or it's a wonderful show.
Right. If you know these songs, and anybody
if you don't know these songs,
if you know these songs, you're going to love this. If you don't know them, you cannot get a better introduction. The people who sang these, Elvis Presley, Peggy Lee. I mean, who hasn't sung these?
So, what are we going to give
songs?
it?
Well, I'm going to give it 4 playbills.
Oh, I'm going to give it 5. I loved this play. I had such a good time. I loved the people in it. I loved everything about it. I hope I didn't leave out anything I wanted to say because I got so excited talking about it.
Right. Yes. This is one we would recommend. This is Straight White Men. Guess what it's about? Straight white men. Really?
Yeah. Well, it leaves out the fact that they're also Christian, but other than
all right. Yes. They are Christian, and it's an interesting presentation. Ironically, all the men cast are straight white men, which
to the best of our knowledge.
To the best of well, they're certainly white and they're certainly men.
Yes.
And I guess that ironically that counts as innovative casting, but you also have to, and I'm just going to call them the persons in charge. One is admits to being a Jew from New Jersey. The other is a Native American. Beyond that, we never quite find out what they are.
Well, no, they tell us what they are. The Jew from New Jersey used to be a man who became a transgendered woman who now considers itself a binary person. And Ty Defoe, the Native American, says that it is two-spirited. I don't know what the correct pronoun is. I'm trying to use the right one.
Is it it or they? I think it sounds like it should be right, but sometimes I've heard they. So
I get confused.
we'll figure that out. We'll go with it for now.
Learning process.
And they're they introduce the show. And they kind of pop out. They don't say anything else during the show. And
except that they say we're not in it.
Right.
And
they're not.
And they're not.
And I wish they were. That's the thing.
More of them,
but
yes,
because,
I know what you mean.
To me, the play is trying to make a point on privilege and what it means to be a straight white man, but too much of it, this is a father and three adult children reunited on Christmas. It's just them, no women. And they spend a little too much time reverting to their adolescent selves.
Perhaps.
And not enough
but one of the
conveying
things,
whatever
you said
type
the
of
word
message
privilege,
they're
and that's
trying
the
to.
key, because Mom, who's not in the play, I'm not sure what happened to her, has made a game for them. She took a game of Monopoly and changed it into a game called Privilege. So if you say something homophobic, you must go to the community chest, but it's not called that anymore. Now it's the LBGT chest, and you must pay a fine for having spoken out of turn. So they're not unaware. These are not the great unwashed. These are, one guy is a banker and he drives a BMW. The other guy is a successful writer. And then there's the third son who's come home to stay with Dad and does the washing and cooking and cleaning.
No, he's a teacher also. The second
well,
one, he's a
teaches
teacher.
1 day a week. It's not really much of a teacher.
And he has a lot of potential, and that's when the play again. And this is like in the last 25 or 30% of the evening, where they ask the brother who's just there carrying, any volunteers, and he says, you had so much potential. You've got so much. Why are you doing this? And he basically, it's because this is what I want. This is where I feel useful.
And you see, and so the play it's fraught. Whether they achieved enough to get us more interested or not, I walked out going, what is that about? And then I thought about it. I kept thinking about it. When I was writing my notes about it, I kept thinking, it's about this, it's about that, it's about such and such.
Well, you made one very profound observation.
I did, wow.
You did, about the set. And
oh, yes, well, it has a frame around
it.
And all I did was notice it, and it has underneath it has a little name tag, and it says straight white men. Yeah. So I thought of it as a diorama. From the very beginning, I thought of it, this is a scene in a museum, and we're seeing what it was like to be straight white men. Of course, the whole thing with Charlottesville and the Middle American rise of neo-Nazism is that white privilege is going, that the world is becoming browner and blacker, and people are very unhappy about this. But that's not what this play is about.
No, not at all.
But that niggles around the side of it. It's there.
No. These are these are the more liberal, and ironically, the playwright young Jean Lee and the director Anna D. Shapiro are absolutely not straight white men.
Young Jean Lee is the first Asian American woman ever to be a playwright on Broadway.
Right. Ironically, does that mean that anyone who is a straight white man can say, wait, you're appropriating our culture?
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, there's
bottom line is I assume there was something to say. Again, too much time on the adolescent hijinks. Oh, and then let me quickly mention
the names of characters.
Yes, the names.
By the way, Stephen Payne plays the father.
Josh Charles is the successful brother from Good Wife.
Right.
Armie Hammer, Stephen Payne, Paul Schneider.
Now, Paul Schneider is the stay-at-home brother, and Paul. I'm sorry, now I got it. Stephen Payne
is the father.
Has had a big article written about him in the Times about the fact that he's an understudy who got a chance to do the role.
Well,
two different actors walked out on this part, and he got to do the role, and he's loved.
And he does it well, and we have to move on. So Kate Bornstein
we said those names already. We did that already.
Persons in charge. I will give this a generous 3 playbills.
I'm going to give it 4 because it intrigued me, and I still haven't figured it out. It's not that it's bad; it's that it's confusing, and I still think there's more there to it than what I necessarily got.
Well, maybe it needs to be refined.
Maybe. Speaking of refined and
and straight white men.
Yes. Well, no.
Well, yes, sort of.
Well, yes. Okay. Okay. I know what you're saying. You're jumping the gun now. This is Summer Shorts 2018. We've gone to see these Summer Shorts now for 12 years. This is their douzaine, as it would be said in French. And I'm afraid that it's the least successful, in my mind, overall, of all of the ones that I have seen. And I say that with great sorrow because I love this. I love this theater, 59 East 59, and I love the concept of summer shorts. I think it's a wonderful thing to do. There are 3 shows: Living Room, Kenny's Tavern, excuse me, and Grounded. The first one is the one.
It kind of explores the theme of straight white men, except that this is a white couple. Apparently,
They're not a couple. They're different ages, and they don't know each other. No, they're not a couple.
All right. They seem to me like a couple, and
they are
one white man, one white woman, who know they're in a play.
Yes, and they keep talking to the above whoever it is, playwright, director, and I'm not sure. It's meta. It wants to say something perhaps similar to what Straight White Men was trying to say.
Well,
but it doesn't quite.
You know what? Compared to this, Straight White Men really gets to the point and hits hard. I skip it.
Kenny's Tavern is really interesting. It's set in the backyard of a tavern. With, little lights to apply that. And it's 2 teachers sitting around talking about the magnet school in which they work and all the great students that they have and blah, 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 and what it takes to get in. And then this really incredible actress, young woman, I've got to get her name right.
I have to say these playbills are very poorly laid out, these
it's
programs.
It's hard to find what you're looking for.
Yes.
Mariah Lee is the standout in this.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, she doesn't have much to do with it.
No, but what she does is she's a glum, down at the mouth, underage girl working in a tavern, trying to serve these people whom she knows are teachers and she knows they're from the magnet school, and she didn't get in.
Right.
And they know who she is, and their attitude is, but you could have. All you had to do was show up and do it, and this girl is a rebel, but she doesn't think she's worth it, and she doesn't think she's going to make it, and it's so much in that one little performance of all the sorrow.
And unfortunately, that is the bright light, and again, what is also a very dark, or I should say more correctly, dull play. I maybe liked it a smidgen better than the first one, but not all that much.
Well, I know you liked the third one, the best of all,
yes.
which is called Grounded, which is the one I liked least of all. So we'll talk about that. Grounded is about 2 flight attendants. We're working on our vocabulary, folks. Used to be students and now it's flight attendants, but they are both women. And one is a newbie and is afraid of flying. And the other is a veteran and tries to calm her down. And in that short time, and we've all sat on planes next to people we don't know and had conversations that
and they get to know each other, and it turns out that the new one has been sexually abused. I thought it was very timely. I liked the interaction between the 2 women. And to me, this was by far the strongest, the most interesting play, and one that could possibly be fleshed out into something where we have to...
I thought, since it was a short play, that it tried to pack a whole lifetime into that, 30-minute section, and it was just too much. It was overloaded. Too many things.
To me, it succeeded.
Alex Denelaris wrote Birdman, the script for Birdman. I just thought I'd throw that in.
And to me, it succeeded.
Okay. So, given this mixed bag, what would you give the evening?
All in all, about 2.5, but I'd certainly go to 3.5 for the, or at least 3.5 for the last one, given what it is.
I'd give it an aggregate of 3. We didn't get to see B. I'm not sure if we're going to see B.
Okay, we have to move on. To our final show. This is actually closed. This is called This Ain't No Disco, a rock opera with music and lyrics by Stephen Trask and Peter Janowitz, and book by Stephen Trask and Peter Janowitz.
Stephen Trask, of course, is from Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So
right.
Expectations were high.
Expectations were high, and in no way, shape, or form were they met. First of all, this ain't no disco. Well, yes, it is. It takes place in the king of discos, Studio 54. But are there any disco songs in the score? None, really. One that maybe approaches it. So that's one problem.
It's because it's a rock opera.
And then, well, it's...
But it
is a rock opera that does not rock.
It doesn't just take place there. It tells the story of the rise and fall of 54 from the 70s to the 80s.
Yes,
so you see the high points and you see the low points.
Yes, but the problem is they really don't know where they want to go. I mean, they have these... There's this one character, the artist, who's obviously Andy Warhol, but they can't call him that,
wig,
apparently.
In a bad Andy Warhol wig.
Yeah,
he wore bad wigs, but this was a bad wig.
And the story is all over the place. There are these 2 characters, one of whom, by the way, we find out they decide they're lesbians, and one basically says, I think I may be a man, and that's the last we hear of it. And they start off as ushers or hat check girls, and they end up having a thriving career as designers, but it's like... You see them, and then a few minutes later, later in the show, they come up and pay, "Hi, remember us?" And
Well,
that's as far as they go.
Again, it's taking on the whole story of Steve Rebell, and it throws in Andy Warhol. But
that's the problem.
And what I thought was that it tried to make Steve Rebell into some kind of Jesus Christ superstar figure.
Oh,
Only,
okay.
well, because he's on that thing, and he's always putting his arms out like this, and he has a fall at the end. But the problem is that he was never as interesting, and he was always coked up, and he just got more and more coked up, so they got crazy.
Are you talking in real life or during
the play? In real life,
Okay.
and also in the show. But I mean, it tried to portray real people to some way.
And then I think the main story is this young man. I think that's Chad
who later becomes
the party rake.
Yes,
who is an aspiring artist. And he's gay, and well, things don't work out for him, and that's basically, and he goes back to turning tricks. It's really, it's a mess.
There's more to his story than that. He gets involved with a publicist who's really publicizing herself, named Binky, and they get married very publicly, and that's a farce.
And we're running out of time.
Okay.
And basically, this should not have been produced, or this should not have been put on without a lot of editing, a lot of rewriting.
Two things.
And a story.
This
Real
guy
quick.
never appears, and I wish he had. I looked for him. And This Ain't No Disco is from David Byrne's Life in Wartime.
How many playbills?
2.5. Even the set didn't work.
I'm going to give it 1 because this was a disaster. This crashed and burned even more than the studio.
Okay.
Tonight, our special guest is press agent extraordinaire, Susan L. Schulman. Let's take a look.
Our guest this evening is Susan L., not Susan F. or Susan H., Schulman.
Thank you.
She is the writer, the author of this wonderful book called Backstage Pass to Broadway. And it is the story of a publicist and what she does and the work that she's been doing for the last, and I can't believe this, how many years?
More than 40.
More than 40. Okay, I like that. That's a good way of going it.
Very diplomatic.
And in alphabetical order, a sampling, a random sampling. Bacall, Bolger, Brenner, Coward, Fosse, Mary Martin, both words, Mustell, Merrick, Nichols, Redford, and Redgrave. Unbelievable. Plus Diana Ross. And those are the stars, and then you list some of the supporting cast, and I won't even go there. Did you grow up wanting to do this, Susan Schulman?
I grew up a theater kid. I went to shows starting when I was 5. My parents took me to see Flahooley, which was a big flop, and it was famous for having Bill Baird marionettes, life-size Bill Baird marionettes, and Barbara Cook made her Broadway debut. And my parents took me at 5 because of the puppets. And I was hooked. Graduated from college, knew I wanted to be in the theater, had no idea. And through a series of kind of being in the right place at the right time, wound up eventually working and apprenticing to big Broadway press agents.
You actually were a press rep for Abby Hoffman. You got to explain
Well, yes. Well, Abby Hoffman had been, everybody knows who Abby Hoffman is, I assume. But he'd been living underground, and he was a fugitive, and there were warrants out for his arrest. And I was working with Carlin Glenn and Pete Masterson, who were the creator and star of Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Right. And they knew Abby Hoffman. And one day, Pete was negotiating to make a movie of one of Abby's books. And one day, they came to me and they said, Abby Hoffman has a scheme, and we want you to be part of this scheme. And the scheme was that Abby showed up at the dressing room, and came backstage, and Carlin was told, a fan wants to bring you flowers. And the fan showed up with this huge bouquet of American Beauty roses, and we took a picture of this fan with Carlin, and the fan's face just happened to be partially covered by the roses. And lo and behold, it turned out it was Abby Hoffman.
Who was still on the run at the time.
Who was still on the run, was very much a fugitive. And my responsibility was to service this picture and to get publicity for this little caper, which I did. And not too long after, I got a call from the FBI asking where Abby Hoffman was.
I would call that what you did with him a stunt, and you actually have a whole chapter about stunts.
Yep.
kind of disappoints me is you don't see that very often today.
I think the kind of goofy stunts that happened, you know, years ago, I don't think people do them anymore, and I think the press probably would just laugh at it, you know, although they were fun.
Yeah.
Everybody
Well,
goes on
one
some TV
that
show or another.
made an impression on me was
Yes.
when you nearly killed the Scarecrow, Ray Bolger.
Oh, God, that wasn't even a stunt. It was just, we thought it was a good idea. Raul Julia, the wonderful Be Still My Heart, Raul Julia was in
Where's Charlie?
Where's Charlie at the Circle and Square.
I love that musical. By
I
the
do
way.
too. It was a wonderful production, and he was delicious. And one day we got word that Ray Bolger, who had originated the role that Raul was playing, wanted to come to see the show, and I said yes, of course, and I arranged it, and I went to Raul and to Mr. Bolger before the show, and I said, before, it wasn't at the show, but, you know, days before, and I said, would Mr. Bolger be interested in leading the audience in Once in Love with Amy? Thank you. We're together. We can do this. And he said, of course. So the deal was that at the end of the show, at the curtain calls, Raul would stop the applause and would introduce Ray Bolger, and he would come out and lead the audience in Once in Love with Amy. And my part of it was that I would tip the press to come at 10 o'clock to the Circle in the Square for this wonderful event, which was great, except that at the end of the first act, where that number falls in the show, in the musical, Raul got carried away. And he stopped the show at the end of the first act, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, the real Charlie Wickham is here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Bolger. And Ray Bolger came bounding out on the stage and led the audience in Once in Love with Amy, and everybody was ecstatic, and it was wonderful and endearing, and Raul was thrilled, and Ray Bolger was thrilled, except there was no press. So I wasn't thrilled. So they ran off into the wings at the end of the act, and I sort of ran after them, and in the just off stage, it's called the VOM at the Circle in the Square, the vomitorium, which sounds terrible, but is just the exit. I found Ray Bolger sitting in a chair, beet red, panting, and people around him very concerned that he might be having a heart attack. And all I could think of was that Raul Julia and I have killed Ray Bolger.
He was the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz.
He was the Scarecrow and wonderful, and was enchanting that night. And so, aside from the fact that I was afraid that I had killed this extraordinarily wonderful actor, I was also horrified that no press was there for this. And so
this is why she's lasted for 40 years.
And I'm a press agent, that's why, you know. And so when he finally got his breath back and he was okay, and he said, no, he was just out of breath. I said, that was so wonderful, but I don't suppose you could do it again. And they both said, sure. And they did. So that was a very successful
And he
stunt.
survived.
And he lived to tell that we did not kill Ray Bolger.
Right.
You
Now,
had a very special relationship with Lauren Bacall.
I did, and I hear you do too.
Well, we'll leave that one aside. But the idea was that she was really your big break in this business.
She was very much my big break. I was a very young apprentice. I don't think I was even apprenticing to the union in the Bill Dahl office. Bill Dahl was a big Broadway press agent, and I was a lackey. I was very low on the totem. I was the low man on the totem pole, and we were handling this new musical called Applause, starring Lauren Bacall, written by Comden and Green and Adams and Strauss songs, and it was Ron Field directing and choreography. It was a big deal, and everybody in the office worked on the show. And everybody was scared of her because she could be tough. And they had a tendency to kind of not always tell her the truth because it was easier. And I was this young, innocent kid. And she would ask me if something was done, and I'd say, I don't know, I'll find out, and if it isn't, I'll fix it. And she would ask another one of the press agents if something was done, and they would say yes, because it was easier to not you know, bring on a scene. And I wasn't doing it to be manipulative or conniving, or I mean, I was just.
You just being honest.
I was just being honest, and
You weren't being Eve Harrington.
I was not being Eve Harrington. I was definitely not being Eve Harrington, who was the the evil in the play. And one day, I was called into the producer's office, and they said, Bacall has informed us that the only person she will talk to in the Bill Dahl office is Susan Schulman. So at the ripe old age of about 23, I wound up handling what became the biggest hit show on Broadway. And it was totally because of her. And she was wonderful to me. I adored her. I never saw, the mean side, the tough side was never directed at me ever. And I think it was partly that she knew I was a little kid and that I probably would have crumbled, you know, because tough I wasn't. And I think she also knew that I cared about her and that I was very protective of her. And I mean, she was wonderful to me. So I have no bad Betty stories. I've heard lots of them and I know lots of them.
Well,
but
you didn't work on
never.
Woman of the Year.
No, I didn't. That was a whole.
Because apparently, it seems like there was a very different Betty on Applause than there was on Woman of the Year.
I think it was I think Applause was a very happy time in her life. She had always wanted to do a musical. This was created for her. It was created around her persona, around her skills, which were, you know, not
minimal.
You know, she was not a great singer, and she was the first one to tell you.
Nor a great dancer.
No, but what she had was used, and that's actually
it was terse, and
it was definitely terse.
And she looked good doing it.
She looked good, but it was really designed to make her look good, and it did. I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. No. You know, people don't create musicals for a star; they create them and then they cast somebody. You know,
but Woman of the Year was kind of made for her.
I think it was too. Yes,
you know.
But this was a very happy time in her life.
What was Times Square like then, as opposed to today?
When I started out,
when you
it was tough. It was not nice. You know, it was cruddy.
So this is in the
70s, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. One of my first big jobs after Bill Dahl and all was I worked for a press agent named Merle Dubusky,
right,
who was still with us. And Merle's office was in a building on 55th and 8th. And the week that I started my job as one of his associates, there was an article in New York Magazine naming that building as one of the pimp headquarters of the Western world.
Oh, dear.
And I would go into work in my little, you know, press agent outfit, whatever that was, my little dress and my little, and there would be girls in hot pants and, you know, tank tops and whatever.
And they weren't press agents?
No, and they would stop me and not them in the lobby.
You were a novelty.
I was very much a novelty, but that was the early 70s.
Right.
So.
And finally, after all these years of prepping people to do what you're doing now, how does it feel to be the one on camera?
It's mighty odd.
Susan L. Schulman, Backstage Pass to Broadway.
More True Tales.
More
This
True
is the
Tales.
second edition.
Second edition.
And it's, I guess, on Amazon.
It's on Amazon.
Bookstores.
It's a drama book. In fact, I don't know, I'm not sure when we're airing this, but I'm doing an event at the Drama Bookshop on September 24th.
I think we could probably
with Peter Marks, who is the Washington Post theater critic, is doing it with me. I'm very honored.
And who has a lovely little blurb
and
on the
who
front.
liked my book. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but the way I talk about it, I say this is a book about some of the incredibly famous people I've worked with, mostly wonderful and some not so much.
On that note, thank you, Susan L. Schulman, very much for joining us.
Thank you both.
And that is our show for the evening. And when you go to the theater, look for Leslie and me, us too.
On the aisle.